This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of April 10th, 2023. And I feel like this week's podcast could not possibly be more timely. And the subject, as you can see if you're watching this on YouTube, is AI coming for me? It's funny that this seems to be creeping up on us so quickly. And I think we expected that in some sense, but it's happening so quickly right now is a bit shocking. Now, unless you've been hiding under a rock, you're probably familiar with the recent news of AI, kind of generative AI becoming something that it never was before, and that's really kind of realistic in its presentation. It was just 6 months to a year ago that we started to see AI models where you could, ask it for a picture or give it a question, and it would come back with something that was, kind of realistic, but not really very realistic. And, you'd see stories where an AI would try to take over a Twitter account, and it would get ridiculous very quickly. Or you'd put in these picture prompts, and what you'd get was entertaining, but it wasn't anything like photorealism or anything like that. And all of a sudden, in the last month or so, it's beginning to seem like that's totally changed. And where now you have AI models that you can ask it really complex questions and it will come back with really, really good answers. There are plenty of examples if you look at these things where it's not only are these things writing HTML code, which is in a sense almost the definition of life, because it is almost reproducing itself, and that's a little scary if you want to think about it that way. But solving complex questions, being able to take and pass tests that humans have problems with, like bar exams and SAT tests and that sort of thing, and where these new AI image generators are so realistic that they can pass for reality a lot of the time, and they're not being really monitored in a way that would stop them from creating very realistic outcomes. And so when you begin to see something like this happen so quickly, and it makes you think, okay, well, if this can happen this fast, well, how quickly can the next generation happen? Well, that's the real question. And really the question beyond that is, what does it mean for content creators like me and eventually for the human race? The first thing to remember when you talk about these generative AIs is, as much as they seem realistic and humanistic and like they're actually paying attention, they're not. We call it artificial intelligence, but we don't call it artificial understanding. As far as we know, and put an asterisk in that for a second, as far as we know, these models are not truly understanding the questions we give them, but they're doing a very good job of interpreting them in a way that really seems like they get what we're asking. And now I said as far as we know, because the scary thing is that a lot of these models are closed, meaning that it's impossible to tell during the process of them learning and training exactly what is going on. So I'm sure there are a lot of people who are paying attention to the question of what AI would look like if it really were conscious, and at least as far as we can tell right now, it's not. So that's the first thing is, when you think about whether or not AI is going to turn into Skynet and take over the world and stuff like that, if it's going to have any sort of understanding of its own abilities or mortality or compare itself to humans in some way, so far none of that is happening. And as far as I know, at least publicly, nobody is talking about that happening unless it happens spontaneously. And since we don't really understand the nature of consciousness in humans, it's hard to know whether or not it could happen spontaneously. So today, as I record this in 2023, and let's hope that this doesn't age poorly, there is nothing to worry about the idea of AIs becoming sentient and taking over. But the real question that we can ask now is what is AI going to do to the labor market? What is it going to do to people like me? Because we've seen, I think, really several levels of this kind of revolution happening over the last 200 years, where, starting with things like just simple manufacturing, taking over repetitive tasks that humans used to do, that changed the workforce greatly. And then we started to see, starting in like the 1980s, we started to see this kind of manufacturing enter into creative fields, where you saw automation taking over things like commercial printing, for example. That's the one that really kind of sticks out. And then you started to see robots, where a robot differs from a regular factory in that it's something that can do really complex moves in a single step. And these were things that it was thought you needed a human for. As we went on, I think that we saw things like, automated quality control, which automated quality control is really an amazing thing. And it's funny that nobody talks about it. But automated quality control is the process where that you pass something by a camera at ridiculous speed, a hundredth of a second or something like that, and it analyzes everything about it fast enough so that it can reject the bad ones, within a matter of a couple of seconds with very little human interaction. And that's a form of artificial intelligence itself that has made the quality of pretty much everything that we use possible. Without this kind of manufacturing, we wouldn't be able to have cell phones. We wouldn't be able to have a lot of the cheap electronics that we do. So that all of it brings us to now. All of these things so far had really been able to do what we asked it to do, but it wasn't ever able to be creative. And when we use the term generative AI, you've probably heard this in stories on the news and stuff like this. Generative AI is mimicking creativity. They don't want to call it creative AI because it really isn't. But it's coming up with a product that is largely indistinguishable from something that we thought only a human could do, like write a song or create a poem, or make a piece of art that looks like a painting, or for that matter, create a web page. All of these things were thought to be things that only humans could do. And what's the next step? I mean, how soon before you could just have an AI create a podcast? Well, the answer would probably be tomorrow, because I think that these generative AIs could come up with podcast scripts, and then there are voice controls, that could just read them out loud, and boom, you've got a podcast. You would just need to plug those two things together, and instantly you have a podcast. And I'm not sure who would listen to it, but it could be possible. It could be done. And so people naturally want my opinion on what does this mean to what I do. I'm a content creator, I'm a marketer, and all of a sudden you have these AIs that are looking to do the same things that I have been doing. Writing great content and recording it and testing it and giving analysis. Well, I want to say two things. First of all, of course I'm a little scared. I think we're all a little scared because we don't know where it's going. But more importantly, perhaps, I'm excited. I'm excited because anytime we put in automation into any sort of process, what it does is it takes away the boring parts. There's a lot of stuff that I have done in my career that is incredibly boring and repetitive. And teaching an AI how to do that is just going to free me up as a content creator to do the stuff that really I want to do. The other thing is, and again, I hope this doesn't age poorly, right now, generative AI is really not good at two things. First of all, it's not good at telling the truth, and it's not good at making real, honest judgments. It can analyze, but it cannot judge, and they're two different things. We know that generative AI will lie if you give it a chance. I asked the ChatGPT engine who I am. I gave it my name and the name of my company and asked who I am. And it told me that I was the founder of Solid Signal, which, by the way, is not true. The founder of Solid Signal is Jerry Chapman, who is my boss and deserves a lot of credit for that. And Bad on you, ChatGPT, for thinking that I was the founder of Solid Signal. But you see, these AI models will lie so convincingly that it becomes impossible to know whether or not they're telling the truth or how they got this information. Over and over again, we've seen these generative AI models give out answers that really just aren't true, just flat out lies. And they do it really convincingly. And this is where, so far, humans still have the upper hand on that. Now that may change, because I think that a lot of the stuff that they are lying about is stuff that you will be able to find on the internet sometime. And these generative AI models are not necessarily able to traverse the entire internet looking for answers. That's on purpose, because I think they're trying to limit their growth. But when these models are able to search the entire internet and compare multiple levels of answers from multiple levels of sources, I think they'll be a lot more accurate. That is going to go away, but it's not there yet. It may be 6 months from now or even 6 weeks from now, but it's not there yet. The part that really excites me as a content creator is the idea of judgments and knowledge, because so far generative AI, and by its nature generative AI, will never be knowledgeable. It will never be wise, because all it's doing is reducing every conversation to an equation. It can't really weigh things in a way that a human can, and that in a way that, for example, that I can. And that's what excites me about it. And where people say, oh, is AI coming for your job? No, quite the opposite. AI is going to take away the parts of my job that I find drudgery and give me time to do the things that only I, a human, can do, like make judgment calls, like come up with really complex conclusions that require leaps of faith, perhaps. Because we know that these AIs are very good at analyzing things and coming up with a solution that is based on the facts, but it's very bad at understanding really the difference between a truthful answer, something that is factual at its core, and a meaningful answer. I'm going to give you an example from some of our tests of ChatGPT. We tested ChatGPT in a lot of ways at Solid Signal to see what it could do for us. And when I asked ChatGPT to write a story for the Solid Signal blog, here's the perfect example of why I'm not worried about AI and why I'm excited about it. I asked ChatGPT what makes satellite television better. What makes it better than other options? And it said satellite television offers high definition. Now, that is, on the face of it, it's true. You can get high definition service from satellite television. But the implication of what ChatGPT was saying was that satellite TV is better because it offers high definition and other services don't. Now, that may have been true 6-7 years ago, but I think that today pretty much every service offers about the same amount of high definition content. Now, if you've got more channels, like DirecTV and Dish have more channels than cable, then you're going to have more HD. But again, that would be misleading, because we're talking not about the gross amount of high definition, but about the proportion of high definition to standard definition content. See, I'm able to look at that and say, that's not meaningful. That's not a meaningful answer. It may be factual, but it's not meaningful. And that's something that I, a human, can do and an AI cannot at the beginning of 2023 do. So that's what excites me. That's what tells me that I'm going to hopefully be able to keep my job for a little while longer. I will be interested to see if we find those answers becoming more and more valid over time, and how that happens. The other thing, and this is a long podcast, so I'm going to probably tie it up fairly soon, but there's a lot to talk about. The other thing that makes me feel confident is that, see, these AI models, like I said, they don't think, they don't know, so they're getting their information from somewhere. They're getting their information often from searching a subset of the internet, and eventually they'll be turned over to the entire internet to try to get their answers. But you see, somebody still has to come up with the source material. Even an AI cannot know something. It cannot analyze the results of something if that information isn't already there. So it gives me the confidence to know that I can put this information out there in the form of test results and opinions and ideas and conclusions, and the AI will eventually get it. But on the other hand, it won't know it before me, because it won't know it before anybody. It's not capable of that yet. I think it'd be interesting to see where that goes, and all I can do is kind of hope that I'm retired by then. I have to wonder if it will take that long, but in the meantime, it's not. Anyway, that's it for this Solid Signal podcast. This has been a really long one, and I think that you could probably talk for an hour about generative AI and what its meaning is in the early part of 2023, but I'm going to cut it off right here and say, as always, like and subscribe. Makes me look good to my bosses. Follow us anywhere you get your podcasts, and I will see you again next week on the Solid Signal podcast.